Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's Ask the Expert session of the ITU Digital Transformation Dialogues. Today's session is part of a larger ITU series called the Digital Transformation Dialogues. The Digital Transformation Dialogues include webinars, fireside chats, and Ask the Expert sessions such as these, where we bring a leader in an emerging technology field to share their thoughts on important topics such as digital twin in cities, or in this case, artificial intelligence. We encourage you to keep an eye out for other upcoming events, which I will give you more details about at the end of the session. My name's Emily Royal. I am the U4SSC Vice Chair. I'm also the Smart Cities Administrator for the City of San Antonio in Texas, in the United States. And I am happy to be the Master of Ceremony for today's session on AI principles for smart cities. Artificial intelligence applications are becoming integral to enhancing efficiency and sustainability in urban environments. In cities, AI is employed to optimize various aspects of daily life. Today, our speaker will be discussing a new deliverable on guiding principles for artificial intelligence in cities, which have been finalized and can help cities on their journey. Finally, before we begin opening remarks, I would like to highlight a few logistical items for you all. Throughout the session, all questions from the audience will be taken from the Q&A window, not the regular Zoom chat. The Q&A icon can be seen at the bottom of your screen. In addition to your question, please also indicate the city and country that you are connecting from. If you would like to revisit this conversation later, I would also like to highlight that the session is being recorded, and both the recording and slides will be made available on the event website. Thank you very much for your time and attendance today. Now it is very much my pleasure to introduce our expert for today's session, Dr. Okan Garay. He is the chair of the U4SSC and a strategic planning advisor for Dubai Digital Authority. Dr. Garay has more than 25 years of experience in consulting and advisory roles across various industries. He has consulted for a number of organizations in the Netherlands, France, Italy, Germany, South Africa, Turkey, and Dubai, so quite an international profile. Today, Dr. Garay will draw on his experience to offer insights into the impact of AI on cities, highlighting the recent work of the U4SSC Thematic Group on artificial intelligence in cities. And so with that, I ask you to please turn your attention to Dr. Okan Garay. I also ask that as we begin our conversation, that you please submit any questions that you have via the Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen. Thank you very much. Dr. Garay, please take it away.
Thank you very much, Emily, for your kind words and introduction. And also a very good morning to you. I know you are in USA, in Texas, so it must be very early morning for you. And I also would like to wish everyone a very good morning, good afternoon, and also good evening to all the distinguished participants. It's very exciting for us to be all together here because today we are launching, in fact, the deliverables of the Thematic Group in U4SSC, which is the first working group for guiding principles for AI in cities. I'm really pleased, honored, and also very happy to be all together today to go through the deliverable with you, with yourselves, quickly, and hopefully also discuss some of the issues around AI. So if you allow me, I will just share my screen and we will go to the presentation. I hope all of you can see my screen. So basically, today's session is all about AI principles for smart cities. Why AI, first of all, and why cities? If you think about cities today, urbanization is progressing at an unprecedented rate. The figures here on the screen show us that almost 70%, more than 2/3 of the world population is going to reside actually in urban areas by 2050. We have already crossed half of the population today to reside in urban areas. And 95% of the urban expansion, as you can see, is going to take place in the developing world. These numbers are just indicators from a population perspective. But if you think about even economy, today, 75 to 80% of the world GDP is in fact created in the cities. Similarly, the 75 to 80%, or in some cases even more than that, in terms of greenhouse gas emissions also take place in the urban areas. So I can confidently say that most of our economic, social, and environmental challenges are taking place in the cities today. And these are not just the obvious issues that I mentioned, but there are also issues around economic inclusivity, resources consumption, environmental degradation, and many others. So we're going to have to really solve these urban challenges in the coming decades in general. And I also want to mention that, in fact, in the UN report, which was published last year for the accomplishment, for the progress around SDGs, it was quite interesting to see that we are halfway through, because as you know, the UN SDGs are due by the end of this decade, by 2030, and only 15%, according to the UN report, were on track with respect to targets in terms of UN SDGs, only 15%. And then 48% are either severely or seriously off track at this point, and the remaining 37 have either regressed or stagnated in terms of implementation. These are actually concerning figures. So we have significant issues to address in the cities in general. So in this context, AI is really a huge opportunity for us to harness as an alternative to address these solutions. I think we all know that it's not the only solution, it's not the only panacea to all these problems that we have, but it can be a very powerful solution, alternative to address our problems. So basically, AI can be used to identify, address, and solve all these myriad of challenges that we have. Not only AI, but as you know, probably if we go maybe one step even behind the AI, one step further on top of the AI, data is also a very important topic. It's almost the foundation layer for AI. So if we can have a good foundation for data, if we can have a good data governance mechanism in place, our experience tells us that AI solutions will be easier to implement. So AI and data go hand in hand almost, in addition to other emerging technologies. As you know, all these emerging technologies work synergistically to complement each other for us to address these urban problems. And also, if you look at AI, the algorithms in general tend to improve over time as we collect more data. So there is this almost tight linkage between data and AI in general when it comes to implementing urban solutions in general. And we have actually observed that during the work that we did in U4SSC, and data is a very important fundamental issue that's to be addressed in conjunction with AI. So AI has a huge potential. It's a major opportunity for us, but it's also important to almost strike a balance between its innovation potential and also its regulation. So this is why we've actually undertaken the work from a policy perspective, I would say, in U4SSC a few years back. Just to give you a brief overview on the U4SSC, as you know, U4SSC is the global platform today to advocate for public policy and to encourage the use of ICT in general to achieve sustainable digital transformation in cities. It not only helps us accelerate SDG 11, which is all about sustainable cities and communities, but it also it's an international platform almost to exchange knowledge and also establish partnerships for implementing SDGs in general, in addition to SDG 11. It's coordinated by 3 UN agencies, ITU, UNEC, and UN Habitat, but additionally supported by 16 UN agencies. So we have the support of 19 UN agencies actually backing us up in U4SSC. And within U4SSC, for those of you who are familiar with ITU, as you know, standardization work is conducted under study groups. Pre-standardization is done through focus groups. But in U4SSC, the work is organized around thematic groups. So in fact, today, there are currently active 6 thematic groups working on different topics. The blue box that you can see on the screen actually is highlighting those. And the third one from the left is actually the artificial intelligence in cities, which is what this session is pertaining to. So the thematic group on AI in cities actually are working on a few topics, and there are 2 working groups under it. The first one was, I would say, because we just completed and we are launching the deliverables today, the first working group was about guiding principles for AI in cities. And the second one is about autonomous cities, which we recently launched, and it's still ongoing work, actually, for those of you who are attending sessions with us. And I would like to invite all the participants, actually, to the second working group, autonomous cities, as we will conduct more work in the future. So as I mentioned, within the thematic group, AI in cities, we've just completed the first working group, guiding principles for AI in cities. And in that working group, actually, we had 4 subgroups even that have undertaken various work. And I would like to thank all the leaders of these work groups. I'd like to thank Gökçe Çobansoy Hizel, who actually led the principles framework subgroup in general. And I would like to thank Asma Karui and Muriyuki Murieti for co-leading enablers framework working group, subgroup actually within this working group. And also I would like to thank Elena Ardelian and also Velan TS for undertaking the work on policy and governance framework. And last but not the least, I would like to thank the co-leaders, Bettina Trotz-Ryan, and also Pedro Garibi for undertaking the work on assessment and implementation framework. So we had actually 4 subgroups under this working group. It's not just the principles that we came up with, but it was more than that in general, as you can see here. And I will take you briefly today through some of the findings as a result of the work that we conducted. Before going into details, I would like to also set the scope clearly that in this working group, we did not intend to come up with a long list of AI use cases. In fact, probably we have hundreds or thousands of use cases in different cities across the world today. So we would only do injustice, actually. That was our aim. But rather, having recognized, acknowledged the innovation potential in AI, we've undertaken the work around its ethical areas and also a bit of maybe regulation and how to put it into place in terms of these principles within the context of cities, how to operationalize it, how to make it simple for cities to implement, not just coming up with the principles, but what are some of the issues around things that can accelerate the implementation of these principles, some of the policy choices that the cities have in realizing these principles within their urban context. And also we came up with a simple 4-step methodology that I will take you through towards the end of this presentation. So it wasn't just the principles, but it's more than that in terms of what we came up with to help cities implement AI principles in general. So we published actually deliverables. I'm sure as you were registering for this session, you've seen the list of deliverables that were published. The main one is the guide actually that we came up with. The homepage, the front page is actually shown on the screen here. You can download it from the website. It's a guide for principles in general, and it touches upon those other 4 aspects that I mentioned, which we have undertaken in the subgroups during the work itself. So I'm going to take you through actually some of the findings. First, when we started the work, as I said, it wasn't about coming up with use cases, but understanding generic or general principles that can be applied almost across the board for all the cities. We were aware of the fact that certain sectors might have their own maybe more specific principles, but our aim was to come up with a list of generic principles that cities can apply in general. It's a framework. What I mean by that is we actually recommend cities to probably adopt some of these principles, or if not some, but all of them in general. But it's up to the cities at the end of the day. As sovereign jurisdictions, they are free to mix and match among these principles which fit to their own needs in general. One thing that we realized, I think we should humbly state it up front, is that there is no one-size-fits-all when it comes to AI implementations and also AI principles in general. So I think based on the particular context that the cities are in, they can select the right principles which are more applicable for their own particular needs in general. I'm going to touch upon some of the principles here. The guide actually goes to details. The first one is all about recognizing the fact that these AI systems do not operate in vacuum. They happen to be in a city context, and cities either enact their own laws, legislations, or they inherit from the national jurisdictions some of these applicable laws. So it's very important for AI implementations to understand which laws, legislations, regulations are applicable to them. And some of these are local, some of these are national, and some of these are even international agreements, international treaties, international resolutions like the UN resolutions, for example, that their member states have already been signatories to. So understanding the laws, the next thing is all about preserving the privacy of the citizens, of the consumers of these AI services, of the stakeholders, broad stakeholders in general. And there tend to be legislations or regulations also pertaining to privacy, for example, constitutions or data protection laws, legislations might already address these issues, or there might be policies or regulations pertaining to privacy. So it's very important for cities to also uphold privacy in their AI implementations. Then being fair and inclusive are also very important. We need to make sure we can include all the stakeholders within a city, be it the residents, be it the citizens, be it the providers of these systems. And also biases tend to actually occur in AI systems. In the guide, actually, we have a nice table that's showing potential biases that might occur during AI implementations. You can use it as a guide, as a starting point if you want. But we need to be careful during the implementation of AI systems to make sure they are fair and inclusive. And in general, one of the things that I humbly observed over the years is that sometimes AI itself is not biased, but it's the data that makes AI biased. At the beginning, I alluded to the fact that AI and data tend to go hand in hand. So it's very important for cities to also understand the biases that come not necessarily from the algorithms, from the AI solutions themselves, but from the data that they use. So that's one area to be careful about in general. And then as we know, these algorithms, AI algorithms, tend to be opaque in general. So it might be also challenging for cities to make sure that these AI systems are explainable and transparent to its users. These are important areas to address, actually. When it comes to accountability, in general, in real life, non-AI systems tend to have accountability. We have either organizational units or persons that are accountable for the systems that we operate in general. And the same argument applies to AI systems as well. Having accountability is very important in case if something goes wrong. We need to mitigate certain risks. We need to mitigate certain failures, operational issues. accountability is a very important aspect to address. I think safety and security is a given. I don't think I need to spend time on it. It's very important, again, to ensure confidentiality, integrity, availability, and also protecting the rights of the users of these systems, among others. The next one is actually quite interesting. Of course, we have certain objectives when we implement these AI systems. We want them to be high performing with respect to our targets, our objectives in general. But robustness is an interesting one. Sometimes we design these systems under certain assumptions. We assume that the operating conditions under which these systems will function are defined from our perspective, but in reality, they may tend to operate in environments which may be different from the assumptions we made. So it's very important to understand, actually, and to also assess to a certain extent the sensitivity of the AI systems, how they would perform in these varying conditions. Robustness is all about maintaining performance with respect to all these perturbations, disturbances that we don't necessarily model when we design these systems. So can we maintain our high performance? Can we maintain our robustness, in other words, as the parameters change? Another thing that we see actually in real life with these AI systems is that the data that we train these systems with, that we feed to these systems, also vary over time. So it's important to understand if the AI systems, the models, the algorithms are sensitive to the data that they are trained on, that they utilize. If they are actually highly sensitive, then our performance would also vary drastically. This is an area that we have to be concerned about. These are maybe more advanced features of AI, but cities can consider this aspect, robustness, with respect to changing conditions in their solutions. The next one is all about sustaining these AI solutions, doing impact assessments. We need to understand economic, social, and environmental impacts of the AI systems and the solutions that we will build in cities. So these are, again, additional principles to look at. And finally, of course, enabling human autonomy is also important. From one perspective, we want these systems to be autonomous as much as possible. But on the other hand, we need to also determine where the humans are in the loop when we operate these systems, where the humans should intervene, when they should intervene. These are very important issues, actually, that need to be taken into account when we design AI systems for our urban solutions. So this is just a list of principles, as I mentioned. One important thing that I want to really highlight is that the approach that we have taken with these principles is outcome-oriented, as you see. And it's also technology agnostic, technology neutral. None of the principles here is necessarily tied to a technology. This was actually a deliberate decision that we made throughout the work that we conducted. So it's very important for us, or it was very important for us to make sure that we were more outcome-oriented than maybe method-oriented or process-oriented, or being, let's say, technology-specific in our prescriptions or recommendations in general. So those are issues that I want to highlight when it comes to principles. And again, it's a framework. We're not saying that all cities should adopt all these 9 principles. I think that's a good set of principles for cities to consider and select the most appropriate ones, hopefully all of them, for their own context. So now that we've actually come up with the principles, the next thing that we did is, for the cities to implement these principles, we've also come up with some enablers, things that can expedite the implementation of these principles, things that can help us to instill these principles in reality. I'm not going to go through, again, all the details, but we have 4 categories here. So leadership, governance, regulatory issues, capacity and skills building, other enablers pertaining to public, private, citizens, different stakeholders in a city, and also pertaining to existing platforms and digital infrastructure in the city. The existence of these might actually help the cities to implement these principles. Maybe you might say some of these principles might be difficult, or there are certain uncertainties, certain unknowns in them. The cities can undertake, for example, R&D programs, can work with different stakeholders, private sector, academia, to resolve some of the issues that are not clear to them. So it's very important to work with different stakeholders And as they implement these principles, to put in place mechanisms to accelerate the implementation of the principles in general. And then, in turn, they will also help the cities implement AI solutions. So again, it's up to the city as to which of these enablers they want to utilize. They can opt not to utilize any one of these, actually. We're not necessarily forcing any city to undertake these in its entirety. But I think it would help the cities to probably mix and match the right enablers for their particular context, so they would expedite the implementation of these principles in general. Which takes me to the third, actually, issue around implementing these principles, which is about governance. If we think about principles, there are probably three roles that the cities should consider. One is the regulatory role. The second one is the executive role, and the third one is the compliance. Now, different cities can take different, actually, approaches, because each one of these three roles can be implemented either in a centralized manner, or in a decentralized manner, or in a hybrid manner. If we take regulation, for example, who is going to put the principles for the cities in general? Is there a designated entity, a centralized entity that's going to do it? Or are there already existing regulators in the city that will work together, coordinate together to come up with the principles, which would be the hybrid approach, or which would be the decentralized approach in general? So each and every regulator might have their own even principles based on the industries that they regulate, or they can coordinate. They can also have a hybrid approach whereby they have a city level list of principles, and then further principles, maybe specific ones, to the industries they regulate. So there's also a plethora of options for cities to select from when it comes to regulation, execution, and compliance. My actually humble observation, looking at different cities, is that execution tends to be decentralized. There is not a centralized entity that undertakes, or agency that undertakes, the implementation of AI solutions, but it's pretty much decentralized across different organizational units or agencies in different cities. When it comes to compliance, again, I tend to observe actually a couple of alternatives. Either the compliance is centralized, so implementation, executions are decentralized, compliance checks are done either centrally, or they are also decentralized and done by different agencies in city governments. This is an area, not only the principles, not only the enablers, but also the governance roles and the alternatives are things or decisions that cities have to decide in undertaking the implementation of these principles. So we're giving almost cities a cookbook, I would say, a toolkit to select from, which would be the appropriate choice for their own context. And which takes me almost towards the end of the guidebook. We've also come up with a simple 4-step methodology for cities. The first one is all about assessment, where we are today with respect to the things that I mentioned earlier. Are there any principles in place today for AI? If there are principles in place, are there any enablers already in place that cities can utilize, can capitalize on, can leverage, can use as a lever to boost their AI implementation? So we kind of do a baselining almost with respect to the things that I have mentioned earlier. That's going to help the cities to understand where they are, their current situation, the as is, as they say, which will then take them to the second step. Once they know where they are, they know their baseline, then the first thing that they can do is to determine their guiding principles at the city level. So the list that I have shown earlier, which is in the guidebook explained in more details, can be a starting point for cities. They can look at that list, adopt the ones that they think are relevant. They can probably even enrich or enhance with other specific ones that they might want to include in their guiding principles. So that would be step number 2. They've understood their baseline, then they select the principles, then they go to the third step. Now that they know which principles they want to implement, then they can select the catalyzers, the enablers. They can mix and match from the list that I have shown earlier by engaging with stakeholders, co-creating with different constituents in the city, the approach that they will take. So they are kind of accelerating the implementation, catalyzing their implementation at the city level. And they can also determine the governance role that the city agencies will take. Who will be in charge of regulation? Who will be in charge of execution? And who will be in charge of compliance at the end? And do we have another decision that the cities have to make is what kind of regulatory approach would they prefer? Is it going to be a soft regulation, more like maybe guidance, guidelines, or it would be a hard regulation like a legislation or a law that enforces these principles on the cities? Again, there's a spectrum of options there. It can be a guideline, it can be a policy, it can be a standard, it can be a regulation, or it can even be a law, which is probably more on the hard regulation side. So it's a spectrum of options that the cities can select from. And finally, once they have adopted the approach, they know their principles, they know how to catalyze it, then they are going to go and assess the results. And this is a cycle that they can run, actually. They can run this for maybe a certain amount of time, maybe a year or two, and then they can go back and do another baselining. Did the city achieve the results that they wanted? Were the objectives rightly stated? Are there more priorities that we need to take into account as a city? Then they would again do the baselining and run this whole cycle iteratively almost as a simple methodology. So it's a 4-step methodology, but quite practical and pragmatic also for cities to adopt. We've gone actually one step further and come up with also 5 simple case studies from different cities across the world. We've looked at Singapore, we've looked at Hong Kong, we've looked at Dubai, we've looked at Copenhagen, and also Buenos Aires. I wouldn't say necessarily that for the other cities to adopt what these cities have done, but it would be a good maybe reference for them to look at how these cities started their journey, what kind of decisions they have taken, what kind of policies that they have put in place, and what principles they have adopted in general. So it's like a reference guide. Again, not cast in stone, but a nice starting point to look at what others have done in this field. The guide itself, actually, the main guide also includes a list of principles that we benchmark. It's non-exhaustive, but there's a list of AI principles that we have researched and benchmarked during our work in general in the Thematic Group. So with that, actually, I would like to conclude by saying that there is no one-size-fits-all approach for guiding principles for AI in cities. This is something that we have learned based on our research, benchmarking, and also discussions and practical experience as well to a certain extent. And the city administrators have a wide range of tools at their disposal to implement these AI principles. The enablers that I mentioned can help them accelerate their implementations. The policy options that they have, the governance roles, give them a bit of flexibility also. And their particular context would really vary drastically in general. So we've given them almost a set of tools that they can mix and match from in general. And also exchange of knowledge is very important for AI implementations. I think local, regional, and also international collaboration mechanisms, alliances, exchange of ideas would definitely help develop the AI principles in terms of formulation and implementation. And cities can also capitalize on the AI principles almost as a lever for economic growth. They can create almost a viable economic subsector from it. These AI solutions are becoming very prominent, as you know. The opportunities they are harnessing the technology is almost in the top agenda of the digital transformation agencies in cities. So there's also an opportunity for them to turn it into an economic potential, economic opportunity for the cities. And I mentioned R&D programs, I mentioned entrepreneurship, for example. The guide itself goes into these details. We can create sectors out of it. We can use accelerators. We can use different innovation mechanisms at the city level to boost the adoption of not only AI solutions, but also the AI principles and address the challenges through economic means in general. With that, I think I will conclude my presentation, and I thank all the participants with us today in this session. As I said, we are very excited to launch our deliverables all together today. And with that, I will end my presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Gray, for that really comprehensive and useful overview of artificial intelligence and its implications for cities. I know we are 5 minutes over time. At the risk of going a bit further, I would like to ask you at least one question that is in the chat. And this one relates to the SDGs. Could you comment for the audience? Which SDG goals does AI in smart cities really apply to, and how can cities leverage the SDGs to continue to do this work in artificial intelligence?
Um, Thank you for the question, Emily, and also thank you for the person who raised it. As I mentioned at the beginning, we have a gap today in terms of implementing the SDGs. Globally, unfortunately, we are falling a bit behind. The numbers, the UN progress reports indicate that. And AI today can be applied to not only one SDG, but to all the 17 SDGs in general. And almost, I've seen actually hundreds of examples, thousands of AI implementations that touch upon almost all the 169 goals that are within the UN Sustainable Development Goals, the program that was put together by the UN member states and signed by them. It can either be from a policy perspective, it can be from a decision perspective, it can be from an implementation perspective, it can be from a planning perspective. So AI can be used actually at several stages along the way, not only to solve a problem necessarily, but also to plan it effectively, to design the solutions efficiently. So AI can be used at actually several points during the UN SDGs implementation. There's a huge potential, I think, for it. And there's a huge potential also globally for us to exchange these solutions, to scale them up, to make them successful, and to almost have a cookie cutter approach whereby one solution applied successfully in one context can be taken to another context and hopefully applied there as well. I'm aware of the fact that it doesn't apply maybe exactly in the same manner, but there's a huge potential to probably tailor it minimally and then apply it in various contexts.
Fantastic. So we're very much over time. We so appreciate your time, Dr. Okungure, and I would like to wrap up by thanking you for your insights. I would also like to thank our audience, of course, for your attendance and participation in this Ask the Expert session. If you enjoyed today's session, we encourage you to join our next fireside chat, which will be on the 14th of March in 2024 on Beyond Boundaries, Revolutionizing Banking Through Digital Transformation. So do not miss this opportunity to be part of another insightful dialogue that unravels the future of banking in the digital age. And offers a glimpse into additional innovations that are shaping the financial services industry for tomorrow. This session and our other events are wonderful opportunities to delve into new and exciting developments in the digital transformation field, and we encourage you to attend ongoing sessions. Our ITU colleagues will also provide relevant links to register for upcoming events in the chat. And of course, the presentation and recording from today's session will be made available on the website, links provided in the chat. So again, thank you for your participation. And with that, this Ask the Expert session is concluded. Thank you very much, Dr. Gray.
Thank you for having me, Emily.